Let's talk about the Good Omens finale, episode 6, The Last Day of the Rest of Their Lives. This title makes no sense. Spoilers! Okay, so many of you are going to hate me for this. I do start off pretty critical at the beginning of this review. The bottom line is, I do think that this is a beautiful tribute to Terry Pratchett that fans can enjoy too. And we now have two canon universes for these characters to live in and two versions of them. So we can just pick and choose whichever one we like, which is not a bad thing. So we start this episode with a little scene that kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's Crowley being arrested and put on trial in hell. I'm not sure why they put that there. It doesn't seem to add too much. So once we see that, we go back to the present moment. I said in the last review that the last episode ended when everyone entered the airbase. I was wrong, actually. At the beginning of this episode, we get the little bit of Aziraphale and Crowley and Madame Tracy and Shadwell trying to come in, which I talked about last time. But it doesn't matter. Everyone's inside the airbase now. This is the point where I once again have a bit of a problem with Aziraphale and Crowley's characterization. We get Crowley shouting at Aziraphale to kill a child, and Aziraphale actually taking a gun and shooting at said child. And the only reason he doesn't hit him is because Madame Tracy kind of takes control of his body. I know that this is probably added for A, more drama, and B, to give them something to do, and C, to make the scene a bit more dynamic. Because when you're reading it, if you think about it, a lot of it is people standing around and talking. The problem with this change for me is that it messes with something that I believe is kind of fundamental to Aziraphale and Crowley as characters. They are both kind of impulsively kind-hearted and also small-scale bastards. They are not big-picture people. What they are seeing in the moment is an 11-year-old child that they don't want to harm. While I don't think that in this context killing the Antichrist would make them evil, I don't think it's in character. And this is the moment where we get the kids, Adam and his 3 friends, facing against the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Pepper is first, and she goes, "I believe in peace," and stops war, and the war screams and disappears. And then there's Brian and Wensley, who sort of do the same thing with "I believe in a clean world" and "I believe in food." It's a little bit on the nose. But I kind of understand why you need to simplify and why you need to spell that out. And Adam just says, well, I don't want this to happen, I don't want the apocalypse. And okay, here's the problem with this scene. We have Adam. He looks so bored. He looks like he really just couldn't care less about what's happening. And then opposite him, you get this really theatrical dad who's going, "Yes, but they will return because they are never far away, Adam, and I am dead." And it's such a bizarre combination. But anyway, the kids defeat the horsemen. Meanwhile, Newt and Anathema are inside the airbase and they're trying to stop the nuclear missiles from being launched. And then they realize that they can use Newton's talent to destroy basically any sort of computer he comes into contact with. So then Michael and super non-scary Beelzebub show up, and they try to talk Adam into restarting the apocalypse and talking about the great plan and how he's part of the great plan and the great plan has to take place. Aziraphale sort of chimes in and is like, so is the great plan the ineffable plan? Because the point of the ineffable plan is that it's ineffable and maybe you don't actually know what the plan is. So that confuses them enough that they decide they would have to go back and speak to their superiors and figure out how to proceed. But they do kind of threaten Aziraphale and Crowley because they blame them for this entire thing, and of course both heaven and hell are going to need a scapegoat. So the apocalypse is technically averted, but it's not over for our heroes, because now Satan himself is coming. In the book, once they realize that Satan is coming, Aziraphale and Crowley have to make a decision to run or stay to protect the humans. And they have a wonderful conversation in which Aziraphale is kind of like, look, we owe them. We, both of us, have messed up so many things for them. We have to stay and protect them. And Crowley eventually agrees, and they stand there with no chance whatsoever, completely helpless, just to try and protect a few humans who are there with them. In the series, it sounds like Satan is coming for them specifically. So they are basically trying to decide whether to lay down and die or try to fight for their lives, which is a completely different thing. So Crowley thinks they're screwed and kind of wants to give up, but Aziraphale wants to fight. And so there's this really weird moment where he screams at Crowley, "Think of something right now or I will never speak to you again." This line makes no sense. Why is Crowley expected to fix this? Why would you never speak to him again when he hasn't done anything wrong whatsoever? You're the one who's been an absolute bastard to him. Why would he even have more power than you do? And then Crowley kind of stops time, I think. The two of them kind of give Adam a pep talk. So time restarts. And this is where we get one of the biggest problems. And it is a horribly CGI'd Satan, voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch. Why? You're breaking the #1 rule. Do not show the monster. Because once you show the monster is no longer scary. We didn't need to see Satan. This leaves no room for the imagination in terms of what Satan is like. He is shown as a very cliché evil monster, and then when Adam tells him, "You're not my father," and kind of alters reality with his powers, Satan just goes, "No!" and disappears like a classic movie monster. I think it's better when we don't completely understand the nature of God or Satan. I just personally really wished that they had cast Benedict Cumberbatch as Death instead, because I think that would have worked. So anyway, apocalypse averted a second time. This thing has more endings than Lord of the Rings. As you may have gathered by now, I wasn't the biggest fan of the actual climax, but now let's get into some of the really fun stuff about this episode. The scene where Aziraphale and Crowley are waiting for the bus at a bus stop to take them back to London. This is a change from the book that I actually love, because in the book they just grab a random jeep from the military base and that's how they go home. I prefer them just waiting for the bus. We get a little cameo from the delivery guy, one of the best characters ever, so it's really nice to know that he's alive again and safe and going back to his wife. And then Aziraphale is like, "Oh, I should probably make the bus drop me off at my shop." And Crowley's like, "Dude, that burned down, remember? But you can come and stay at my place." Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They presumably go to Crowley's place, and then when it's the next day, Adam has basically rebooted the universe. So we see Crowley come out of his apartment and he sees the Bentley parked on the street and he smiles, but then he goes into a cab and drives off, and that got me. I was like, what is going on here? In what world is Crowley not driving his Bentley? And then we see Aziraphale at the bookshop kind of noticing that it has been restored, but now there's a bunch of children's books in there. In the meantime, in Tadfield, we see that Newt and Anathema are happily together. We get one of the rare, actually really touching scenes with Adam. His mother enters and they have a really sweet little mother and son conversation, and then he goes out into the garden. Even though he's grounded, his mom allows him to go out into the garden with the dog. He kind of makes a hole in the hedge so that dog can get out of the garden, and then he'd have to chase him. So Adam has his happy little ending in Tadfield. Back to Aziraphale and Crowley, they're in the park getting ice cream and they get kidnapped by their respective sides. This is an entire sequence that has been added to the series that wasn't in the book. So Heaven and Hell both want to punish what they consider traitors, and Heaven has called somebody from Hell to bring them hellfire, and Hell has called the Archangel Michael to come down with some holy water. Aziraphale walks into this pillar of hellfire and Crowley is put into this bath of holy water and nothing happens. So Heaven and Hell decide to let them go because they're pretty scared and shocked at this point, because they're like, well, we don't know what's going on, we can't hurt them. And then Aziraphale and Crowley meet in the park again and it's revealed that they basically just swapped bodies. But my question is, did nobody in Heaven and Hell figure this out? I mean, demons change bodies and angels change bodies. He looks like Crowley, but he's not being hurt by holy water. Maybe it's not actually Crowley. Nobody thought of that? But anyway, I can suspend disbelief enough to believe this. And then, at the last ending of the episode, we get Aziraphale and Crowley happily dining at the Ritz, and a nightingale actually sings on Berkeley Square, like in the lyrics of the popular song, and we get to hear the song and we kind of pan out and we see the nightingale, and that's where the series ends. Is this adaptation perfect? Of course not, but that would be impossible. I do think that this is the best adaptation that we could have realistically gotten, and there are some fantastic things that have come out of it that weren't there before. There is so much of Terry Pratchett in this, and I just think that it's so sad that they didn't get to do this together, and I'm actually getting emotional now. But I'm very happy that it got done, and I'm very happy that it got done by Neil Gaiman. I will always love this series, regardless of its little problems and little things that I have criticized. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Neil Gaiman, for bringing us this series, and now we can go and rewatch it.